Good morning, everybody. We're doing me and Jessalyn Randle and Q&A or an Ask Us Anything quick, short live. So let me add Jess. Hey, Jess. Alrighty, let's see. Request to join. Okay, accept. Go. We are doing a quick Ask Us Anything Instagram live. Hello, everybody. Jess, good morning for me and good night.
Yeah, it's
for you.
nighttime for me, but
No,
we're here.
I literally woke up 20 minutes ago and I was like, oh my God. I put my alarm clock at 4:30 a.m. That was the goal.
Oh my gosh.
Waking up at like 7:40. So this is why I was like, Jess, can you give me just 5 minutes?
Yeah.
So but we did it. How are you?
Good, how are you? It's been
Great.
a few weeks. We needed to do another one of these.
I know the Instagram live that we originally did did so well on my YouTube channel because I uploaded it there as well and people loved it. I think both of our personalities are very similar. We're a little bit fiery. So people I guess enjoy that. So yeah, I was really excited to do this. So how have you been recently?
Good, yeah. What you wanted to just do a Q&A like between me and you or with people involved too?
Well, if people want to ask us questions, I think that let's give them the priority. So any questions you guys want to ask us, we're gonna prioritize answering that. And then if you don't, I'm sure we have a gazillion things we can talk about.
Yeah. No, I definitely think so. I'm always interested in the food addiction, sugar addiction thing. That is so interesting
Mhm.
to me of just how the brain works and how some people deal with it and some people don't. I love learning about that.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. I'm really doing all of my work lately with food addiction. I am interviewing all of the world leaders in it. I've had Dr. Joan Iflin. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She wrote the textbook on food addiction. I've interviewed Jane Steele, who's a coach also. Dr. Vera Tarman, another major name. Mike Collins. So I'm really excited, and I still have more people that I want to interview because I feel like this is the future, you know? Hard time there. Disconnect. Okay. Just living in Japan. Uh, just living in Japan. Do the locals ever give you looks for your carnivore orders? We
Okay,
love you all.
I hear
Yeah.
I hear you. It froze for a second, but we're back.
Yeah.
So she
Yeah.
asked me, do people are people look at me weird for carnivore orders? Is that what the question was?
Yeah. Yeah. In Japan, because you order all the meats, the people give you weird looks. How is it over there?
No, not really. Not really at all. And I don't think they really understand the concept of carnivore. So it's just I just eat meat. So I don't know. Maybe they think I'm weird, but I haven't noticed it so far.
Right, right. And then another question. I love eggs. Is it okay to eat regular store-bought eggs every day? And then another question from the same person, how to remove yellow stains from the teeth due to carnivore? I don't, yellow stains due to carnivore? Are you drinking coffee? I don't think carnivore is gonna stain your teeth yellow. If anything stains the teeth, it's a lot of the pigments in plant foods. But with regards to store-bought eggs, I mean obviously it's always best, right, to get highest quality eggs. But if all you can do is just get store-bought eggs, this is what I do honestly. We're good, you know?
Yeah, same. I get my eggs at the grocery store. They're on the packet. They're in Japan. They're
Mm.
Japanese eggs because American eggs are way too expensive here. So they're supposed to be from a local farm, but I don't know if that's true. But they're good. I like them. I eat them.
Right, right. And I think also like the more orangey the yolk is, I think it means it's got more beta carotenoids, because the chicken is eating grass and things like that as opposed to just giving them feed that's like grains. So yeah, I don't know. You could, but I don't think it's a huge difference compared to the really high quality ones. Anything is going to be better than that bowl of oatmeal that everybody thinks is so healthy,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's and I know we don't have a lot of time. It's very late on your end and my brain is trying to wake up. I'm literally waking up with you to this morning. I need to wait like at least an hour before you can talk to me, you know?
Uh-huh. Do you
Yeah.
so do you eat first thing when you wake up or quickly after you wake up or do you wait? Because that's like a big debate in the kind of the carnivore biohack sphere of it's important for females especially to eat right after they wake up or within an hour or something. No, you don't do
I don't know. Because I feel like I would be force feeding myself at this hour. I'm so not hungry in the morning. Um, funnily enough, if in the past, like when I would eat the carbs all the time, I would wake up hungry. I would like yeah, I would wake up and would want to eat, you know? Ever since I cut out the carbohydrates, I don't feel that way. Here's a funny thing. If I do have dairy on carnivore, I wake up the next morning with a growling stomach. And I've discovered by talking to all of these world leaders in sugar addiction is that it's actually a form of an addiction withdrawal symptom when you have this growling stomach, because there's no real reason why I should be hungry this early in the morning when, you know, it's not like I've been days without food, you know?
yeah.
And apparently like the growling stomach is not really a hunger signal, it's actually a withdrawal symptom. And remember, dairy's got casomorphins, which activate the opioid receptors in our brain. And so that is why you're kind of detoxing from this hit of this morphine casomorphin hit that you got. Not to mention the combination of casomorphin plus the high fat content plus the high sodium content. All of those individually have some addictive potential, but then when you combine them, you know, that's when you really create an addictive food. And this is what the food industry does. They know this very well, which is why they always combine things, you know, fat and salt and carbs.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It says I saw one that says not really a question, more biohacking, but do either of you take methylene blue thoughts? I don't even know what that is.
Me neither. I've heard of it. And I know when I Google it now, right after, I'm gonna be like, oh yes, but I don't. I don't take it, and yeah, my brain is like, I can't even tell you what it's used for at the moment.
Yeah, just so. And then there was another one of how do you wash farm fresh eggs, or do you wash farm fresh eggs before hard boiling? I get mine from a farm, and they'll have stuff on them, but I hear don't wash your eggs. But what after? What about boiling? I'm not sure about that. I've never gotten that super fresh of an egg before.
Yeah, me neither. I've never gotten those kinds of eggs before. And I think normally when you buy regular store-bought eggs, they do wash them. Obviously, they're not going to give them to you with all the stuff on it. My common sense would say, like, even if it's got stuff on it, yeah, just crack the egg and try not to get anything, you know, like if you crack the egg, you're not going to get the outside stuff on the shell. And because when you wash them, the eggshell is actually porous. And so when you wash it, actually the stuff goes inside. Some of it goes inside a little bit because of the porosity of the eggshell. So it would make sense to not wash it, I guess.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I just
Oh.
learned something new. And someone else said, wondering if any more info on sardines. I eat a can of GV brand daily. They're wild caught and only $1. That's cool. Good tip. And but while high in mercury, there's supposedly do you have a mercury and arsenic? Is there like a risk to eating sardines? I've heard that if it's smaller, you don't have that great of a risk if it's like a small fish.
Exactly. Yeah, in terms of mercury, right? We're talking about.
And arsenic.
Yeah. So The bioaccumulation thing with seafood is basically the way that it happens is that you have the least amount of concentrated toxins in the smaller fish, and then the larger fish will eat a lot of those smaller fish, and so they will concentrate more of those toxins like mercury and everything else over time. And because, you know, as you go up the food chain, you have now even larger fish eating those medium-sized fish that ate a lot of, you know. And so as you go up the food chain or the size of the fish, the concentration of toxins actually goes up, which is why we generally recommend that you stick with the smallest kinds of fish, and especially if you're pregnant, that's the official recommendation in my opinion. Is like, so if you're not pregnant, it doesn't affect you. Of course, I think we should all follow those guidelines and just pay attention to how much of those large fish like shark, mackerel, tuna, those are really large fish that really concentrate a lot of mercury, for example. So yeah, you want to really be careful with that. There is another school of thought that says like, hey, the selenium in the seafood neutralizes the mercury, and so it doesn't matter, you can still have your fish. I don't think we have really good studies or enough evidence to just be safe mentally thinking that, yeah, it doesn't matter because of the selenium. I don't think we know for sure. And unfortunately, that's, you know, that's the world we're living in. You know, we do have more environmental pollutants, and so we have to be careful, do saunas, look into chelation treatment, at least one course every few years, you know, to pull those environmental toxins out of your body.
Interesting. Okay. And then someone did give a tip to just say, take a damp paper towel and wipe off the shell of the egg. So if you're getting farm fresh eggs, just wipe it off, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Because see, when you're washing it with water, there's a pressure from the water, right, kind of driving it into the pores of the shell. And so like if you just wipe it, there's less of that happening. That's a good tip.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. And then Joe Replicator. Canned salmons contain the lowest amounts of mercury and arsenic, while canned sardines were low in mercury but very high in arsenic. Interesting. This is, do we have the article? Maybe plug that article for us in the description box below. That way, because I always am gonna save them and post them on my YouTube channel, and then I can put the references in the description box. Paolo, not a baker. Doc, you mentioned dairy had some addictive potential that affects the brain. Does that include butter? No, it doesn't include butter. Great question, actually. So the reason why butter doesn't have the same level of addictive potential, it does to a certain degree, but not as much as dairy. And that's because it doesn't, especially if it's unsweetened. So if it's unsalted. So if it doesn't have salt, then you don't have that combination of high fat, high salt. So that's very good in terms of addiction. You know, you don't have that, right? And then another thing is that it doesn't have the casomorphins, because casein that turns into casomorphin is actually the protein mainly found in cheese when you concentrate the cheese, right? So compared to all the types of different dairy products, cheese is the one that has the greatest addictive potential because it's concentrated casein, which turns into a lot of casomorphins in the brain, plus it's high fat, plus it's high sodium. So it's that combination that raises tremendously its addictive potential. It's still not as addictive as a cake or chips or things like that because of the protein and fat content, which help our satiety signals. It kind of sends the signals, as opposed to when you're having cake or cookies, you don't have those signals. They're very delayed, and so you end up having a lot more calories of those addictive foods. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I saw a post recently and it said basically, hate to break it to you, and it breaks my heart too, but we're supposed to eat bland food and just like food that's very basic. And I don't know, part of me knew what they were trying to say, because we're not meant to have like eat the rainbow and have all these like Cheetos and things like that. But then part of me was like, but steak is really good. I wouldn't consider steak bland,
Mm.
but I don't know. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think that we're meant to kind of eat bland food or enjoy it? Because I enjoy carnivore.
That's because you haven't been stimulating your brain with addictive foods. But if you're still having rice and pasta and donuts and all that kind of stuff, because you get such a high dopamine secretion after eating those, and when you do eat the steak, it tastes nasty, you know?
Okay.
And people will feel that more when they have the brain genetics or the addictive brain history. So they've already developed a food addiction to the point where their brain physically changes. They're gonna feel like the steak tastes awful. So it's all about perception of the steak. So when you eat highly addictive foods, you will perceive the steak to be bland. When you actually get sober, when you actually quit eating all of the addictive foods and only eat steak or eggs or anything that's, just single ingredient animal foods, over time, you will start to enjoy it more and more and more, because there is nothing that's far more addictive to compare it to. It's really the way you experience pleasure has a lot to do with how much pleasure you had in a previous experience. So for example, if you and I right now, let's say, go to this extravagant vacation, we have so much fun, all this dopamine is pumping. If the weekend after we go to another vacation that's at like half the level of maybe it's a cheaper one, it was on sale and there was nothing really that exciting, now all of a sudden we don't enjoy it because we've already experienced something much higher in terms of dopamine release. So now when we go to this other vacation, we're going to get so bored. And actually this happened to me and my hubby when we went on our cruise a few months ago. We were used to this, like nicer cruises, and then that one that we went to was awful and we hated it. We hated every second of it. But if it were our first cruise ever, we would have had a blast,
Yeah.
So the amount of pleasure you experience from either vacations or experiences or even foods have a lot to do with what you're comparing it to. What was the kind of stimulation you had before,
Yeah.
So if we flip the order of this on sale vacation, if we go on the on sale vacation, you and I, for the first time, we're gonna have a great time, but that was only because we don't have anything else to compare it to that was higher in terms of dopamine release. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's Can I ask you something else too then?
Yes.
So do you think, because do you know how in a lot of cultures, not just American cultures, but everything is centered around food? Every sort of, if we celebrate a holiday, it's food. If you celebrate an achievement, you go get food. If you break up with someone, you go get food. Everything's emotionally connected to food. Is that okay? Or is there a healthy boundary that you can have with that? Or should we remove the emotional connection to food completely and just eat to fuel our bodies and not have any like extra gratification with eating, in your opinion?
I would say the latter. I would say it's much better to, as a society, get to a place where not every emotion is linked to food. I think food really should just be fuel for us. Doesn't mean you can't share a nice dinner, share the steaks together. You're still gonna have a good time. But the only way you can celebrate with food is when you're eating beyond your hunger cues. Because, generally, if you're on a carnivore diet and just having a steak, probably can have a steak and a half a day. Sometimes I might not even be hungry a whole day, and so if you really want to pair every experience with food, then you're not eating for hunger anymore. You're just eating to stimulate the addictive brain. And now we know the studies are chilling in that food, a lot of combinations of foods are far, far more addictive than heroin. Not just cocaine, those are the old studies. Oh yeah, everybody knows sugar's more addictive than cocaine. Well, now guess what? They're more addictive than heroin, you know? So you literally stand no chance of ever deciding to get clean or get healthy or lose the weight. When we see this, right? 95% of people who try to lose weight regain it all within 1 year. Why? It's not that they're not trying to do everything in their power. And trust me, I see those clients every day. They are trying and trying and trying. Sometimes they've spent decades of their lives just going in and out of, you know, losing weight, gaining weight. People are trying. People want to get healthy. They want to lose the weight. They just can't because they're completely unaware that they're dealing with a substance that is far, far more addictive than heroin. You know, it's like mind blowing to even say this, but it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
I don't think that'll ever be a mainstream talking point either. I feel like that's going to be something that's going to be they're going to try to bury and not make it available.
Yeah.
Conspiracy theory type of thing, you know?
I think we're definitely going to be fighting a much harder battle as opposed to the way the cigarettes companies and you know that business model was taken down, because I think the food industry is a much more powerful industry. It's a $1 trillion industry, and so compared to the cigarette companies, it still took them a long time to finally regulate them. It literally took 30 years after all of the studies that we had showing how addictive those cigarettes were. It still took 30 years for legal, you know, making it illegal to market to children, all that, and regulating it, you know? Mm-hmm. So I think with food, again, I've been talking with a lot of world leaders in this field, and they say around 30 years for this to happen. I think it'll take longer. I think it's a harder fight. However, maybe because the rate of information exchange and technology is exponentially growing, that might work in our favor, because you can't stop the message anymore. We can literally reach millions of people by you know, YouTube, Instagram. So we have that power, whereas in the past, in the 60s and 70s, they didn't have that to fight off the cigarettes and the addiction in that way, you know?
Yeah, that is true. That's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was a question too about liver, of how much is safe to eat a day or a week. Do you need to limit organ meats and liver and things like that? I don't personally really eat organ meats other than if you count beef tongue. I love beef tongue, but
Really?
yeah, I love beef tongue. But what do you think that we should limit organ meats?
I don't have organ meats either right now. I'm not even taking the supplements lately. It might be a good idea maybe for me to go back and take the supplements, just like the equivalent of what, 3 ounces a day. I think it's a good idea because it's so hard to run these studies. It is, you know, we barely have any studies on carnivore, right? Because of that, I think we have to take advantage of our history and look at what historically our species has done and what were the consequences of that. And there are opposing accounts. Some accounts will say we never ate the organs. We just threw them for our dogs to eat, and we never really ate them. And then there are other accounts whereby, oh no, this was the prized portion, you know, part of the animal, and we gave it to the elder in the tribe and whatever. So regardless, I think whichever way you look at it, it is clear that we didn't overeat the organs. There wasn't ever a lot of organ compared to muscle meat. So I think the focus should be on muscle meat, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm. And where do you stand on fruit and honey? That's interesting. But I personally never liked honey, so I was never a fan of honey even before carnivore, so I will never really probably be a fan of honey. Fruit, I think it's up to you of if you want to eat it or not. I don't think that eating Paul Saladino amounts of fruit is probably a great option for the majority of people, because they're not surfing 4 hours a day and super active like he is.
Right.
But fruit,
and
yeah.
Have a sugar addiction history. 86% of the American population definitely have they rank pretty high on the sugar addiction scale. And so if you have that, then it's gonna trigger you, you know. And I've worked with clients whereby we're like, you know what, we're doing so great, and let's see if the sleep improves a little bit by adding a small amount of berries. And it's like, it triggers cravings. It really does. The only time I think that it might be okay is if you've never developed an addiction. But I don't think I've ever heard of a person who hasn't consumed sugar ever since they were a child. So I don't see who is that perfect person who lived in that ideal world that's never had sugar. Maybe Mike Collins' kids, because he raised them without any sugar. They might be able to have fruits and be fine. But even when they do have the fruits, I would still recommend them to stick with the lower sugar ones, which mimic more whatever fruit was available to us historically. Because the amount of sugar in this modern fruit supply, this is not natural. This is hybridized to create those Franken fruits that have more sugar in them, because they figured out that sugar is a drug, and the more you add its concentration, then that means you're going to sell more.
Wow, that's interesting. So I have a question for you then, because I never really like thought I struggled with any sort of food addiction or sugar addiction. When I first started carnivore, it was pretty easy for me to give up the foods that I needed to give up. And when I do eat something, if that's not carnivore, I can have like literally one bite or one sip, and then I'm fine and I can like leave it alone. So I never like looked at myself as having an addiction, but I did grow up eating a ton of sugar, obviously, like any other American kid, and was overweight. And if I got a bad grade, I would eat ice cream. If I felt sad, I would eat ice cream, things like that. But then time to give it up, I was like fine with that. But I will, like, every few months I'll have like blueberries, and then for like one time like a handful full of blueberries, and then be fine. And then in a few more months I'll just want like a couple blueberries again. So I don't know, do I have an addiction? I've never thought of myself as having an addiction.
No, no. Yeah, it's very clear. It's very clear that you don't. There is a genetic tendency for that, you know. There is something called reward deficiency syndrome, whereby 30, it depends on what races we're looking at or ethnicities. If you look at that, for some will have a little bit higher prevalence of it, but around 30 to 50% of us have that reward deficiency syndrome, which basically means that we are born with around half of the D2 receptors or dopamine receptors in our brain, you know, which is so sad in a way, right? But if almost half of us have it, does that mean that that's a syndrome? Does that mean that's just normal, you know?
Yeah.
So those are the people who tend to have a much higher risk of developing addictions. Yeah, as they go through life, they learn that having those highly palatable foods or drugs are lighting up their brains. Even though they're lighting them up for a short period of time, you still remember that feeling of a lot of dopamine in your brain, and that makes it very hard to break the cycle. Can you break the cycle? Yes, some people can do that just by focusing on increasing the concentration of D2 receptors, you know, by things like exercise, having a healthy, happy, well-connected life with, you know, social relationships are huge. All those things can raise overall levels of dopamine. So if your baseline level of dopamine is elevated, you're much less likely to turn to any external source of dopamine activation. So now you're not really interested in foods, you know?
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. That was going to be my next question of, can you break an addiction or an addictive behavior, or do you just replace it with something else? Can like a person who has struggles with addiction just stop that behavior, or do they have to supplement it with something else that's healthier?
Great question. So most of the time, what I see in like the 12-step programs and most of the people who say they are recovered or sober, there's something called addiction interaction disorder, where they've just learned that if they eat more sugar, they don't have the craving for heroin or cocaine anymore. And so because food addiction isn't still adopted as a thing, as a matter of fact, in the 12-step programs, I think it's like in their official book, they say, you know, eating more sugar is helpful to keep you off the drugs. Yeah. So they're just completely oblivious of the fact that that's an actually more powerful drug. And so in there's a lot of people who are quote unquote sober, but really not, because now they've developed a different addiction that's probably even worse, you know, in terms of your health. You start gaining weight, you lose your health, etc. And it becomes, and eventually makes it even harder to stay sober when you are constantly, your brain is on fire and inflamed. So there is that. There's the addiction interaction disorder. But then there's also what I work with my clients is that I'm constantly showing them all the different ways whereby you can actually heal the root cause of the addiction. So things like exercise, again, it's just so powerful. The more you increase your level of fitness, that correlates directly with how much dopamine you have and D2 receptors you have even at rest, even at baseline. So even when you wake up in the morning, you're just more fired up, you're more pumped because you have more dopamine in the morning, right? And so it's not just during the workout session that you're pumping out the dopamine and all the other neurotransmitters, but even at rest. And so you keep that up long enough until you have a few months of healthy life and living and, you know, eating a carnivore diet and all that stuff. By the end of it, your hormones will have normalized, and that influences how much dopamine you have at rest, right? Your microbiome will have improved. All those things now kind of take the load off of your workouts, and they're constantly now producing healthy levels of dopamine and neurotransmitters. And so then eventually you don't have to work out as hard as you did in the beginning. You can just maintain it, you know? Mm-hmm. And that would literally treat the root cause of the addiction. And I've done it both ways in my personal experience. The first time I ever tried to go sober without the sugar, I wasn't really training as hard as I used to. And I remembered I started going to the mall a lot and shopping a lot.
Oh.
You know, it was like, yeah, it's like your brain needs dopamine, whichever way you can get it. If I can't get it from sugar and I'm not training, then for me, it was like, okay, let's go to the mall. And I started buying a lot of clothes. And then when I did it, the second time, that's when I improved on my approach. And I was like, you know what? I think exercise is the solution here. And it really was. Like, I haven't been shopping as much, if any. I don't care, you know. I mean, I still enjoy shopping. I'll never say no to a mall trip, but it didn't become this weekly thing, or sometimes twice a week if I'm getting a really strong craving, you know. It was like months without feeling the need to shop. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. And can we just do like 5 more minutes?
Yes. And then we want to make sure you get a good night's sleep.
Yeah. Thank you. Someone asked opinion to lose the last 10 pounds, either caloric restriction with lowering dietary fat or increased dietary fat to signal abundance in the body and not go into survival mode. Yeah, no. Calories still matter. I know we like to think in the carnivore community that calories don't matter, but they do. It's a really good estimate that gives us where we really are in terms of how much energy is coming in, right? Most of my clients try that, right? Most of my clients try to do, let's do all the butter, let's do all the fats, and don't care about the calories, and that you can gain weight so fast that way, and people don't realize how hard it is then to peel that off. And that's usually my work. That's when they come to me, and I'm like, okay. Yeah. You know, yeah, no, I definitely do not agree with the don't count the calories, eat all the fat, and it's going to signal abundance. No, it's going to signal fat storage is what it's going to do. You're familiar with Lily Kane, right? Absolutely. Okay, yeah. So she did a really good video with her husband, her new husband, where he did the eat a stick of butter a day thing, I think, and he just ended up gaining fat. There you go. A whole video on that. Yeah. You have to understand, sometimes there are certain genetics that don't gain body fat. So things like, I think Asian genetics, there are other, I think Asian genetics mainly. I can't remember if there is. I mean, I should think a little bit deeper into what other genetics play a part. But if I would just want to throw a general blanket, I would say that they don't gain subcutaneous fat very easily, right?
And so you can overeat the calories and you're not going to gain body fat. And if you don't, then it's great because you're giving your body some form of dopamine release. Because remember, anything that's calorically dense, like butter, our brain naturally releases extra dopamine and response to eating that, right? And so there is some addiction potential with just eating sticks of butter, especially if it's got salt in it. So that's going to help ease off the craving for the sugar, which is great, fantastic, and it's going to allow you to get sober from sugar, which is the most, the worst of, in terms of all of the addictions, right? And so that might work for people who don't tend to gain body fat, and they're just doing it for health, for sure. But I think the vast majority of people, especially a lot of people that I work with, African Americans, I've got a lot that I work with as well. They gain body fat very easily. Caucasians, I mean, yeah, everybody gains weight very easily. It's very rare to have somebody who has those genetics. And if they do, that's great, you know, because like mentally it helps for you not to gain body fat while you're, you know, eating all the butter. And that's fantastic. I'm sure it works, you know, and under those circumstances, you just have to pay attention to your biology, your genetics, and how that is going to react to eating all the fat.
Okay, so one last question. Okay. So it was about oxalate dumping. Did you experience any oxalate dumping when you stopped eating plants, and how long did it last?
Yeah, 2 weeks, keto rash. It was bad. It was really bad. I took pictures of it, like all of my trunk of my, you know, like on my, like right under the bra line and the back, around the bra line too. Also like lower back. I did have that, and it was itchy, but I knew, like the first few days you're like, what, you know, and then you go and you do your research, and some people will have that for like 7-8 weeks, you know. For me, it was only 2 weeks. That was good.
Interesting. I don't think I did. If I did, because I had acne, so maybe it came with some sort of form, and I just assumed it was skin issues. But I didn't have anything like that, or like in my bra line or anything. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lot more questions now too. Everyone heard one more question, and they're like, adding in their questions. We'll have to do like a fire round real quick. So I did see one that said, can people who are pregnant do this diet? So do you want to answer that really quick?
Yes, but I would generally prefer they started before they get pregnant. I think there are a lot of changes that happen in the adaptation period that I'd rather you do carnivore or even keto before you get pregnant for a while, for a few months, you know. I think that would be much better.
For losing weight. It says, do you recommend a fat protein ratio for losing weight? I'm not sure exactly what the question is asking.
Yeah, like I guess I would say, you know, anywhere between 50 to 80%, probably 80 is too much, but 50 to 70% of your calories, I think, from fat and the rest from protein. That ends up being usually what I work with most of my clients for weight loss.
Yeah, I do about 60-40. So do you find that body composition can change while the scale stays close to the same eating one ingredient, ketovore? Yeah, I definitely think so. Your body composition on a carnivore changes drastically.
Agreed.
Okay, let's see. I think that's it. Okay.
Yeah. You can go to sleep now.
Yeah.
That was great.
I'm gonna be like hyped now and just like be laying here and be like
oh no. I know. You know, I don't know like the time difference, you know, between Florida and Japan. And so but I know it's not very easy for us to sync our schedules together.
Yeah, I think it's like 12 if I remember correctly. But I'm not sure. Put me on that. I might just be pulling that out of thin air. But I don't know. This was fun. Again, though, I really enjoyed it. It's always fun chatting with you.
Same here. Thank you everybody for all your questions. And I love our collaborations, Jess. We'll do more in the future. And yeah, I'm gonna post this on my YouTube channel. So we'll get even more people to listen to this, and maybe we'll do another one in a few months.
Yeah, and if we didn't get to your question, or if you're asking it and we're ending it now, like message one of us or put it in the comments or something, and someone will answer it.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
Great tip. Awesome. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day, everyone, and good night. Bye. Bye, everyone.